Yo, 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 Niner fans, what is up? Welcome to a very special episode of Shifty's 49ers Talk. I am joined here by JONNYDEL'S Football Academy. Jonny, I'm going to have you go ahead and introduce yourself, plug your channels, social media, all that good stuff, and then we'll get into some of the topics.
Hey, man, it is so awesome to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me on. I am Jonny Dell. I am with JONNYDEL'S Football Academy. You can find me on YouTube at that address. You can also find me on Twitter at JONNYDEL'S. And so anywhere you look for JONNYDEL, you'll find me. You can Google me, and it'll take you to those channels. What's up, Lisa? I see you in the chat. Lisa's a good follower. She's very active on all my content and the videos and everything. But yeah, it's just, man, it's been awesome. This season has been great. It's been good for the channel. It's been good for everything. And so just excited to talk about the 49ers after they clinched the NFC West in Seattle. Is there anything better than that?
I was just about to say the same thing, man. Like, it's just so sweet. It kind of takes me back a little bit to 2019. Maybe not in is as dramatic fashion as 2019 when we, clinched the division in Seattle with that awesome Dre Greenlaw tackle, but still super special. There's so many storylines from this Niner team, which we'll get into a little bit later. Let's give a very quick shout out to some of the people here. Damian Lee, what's happening, buddy? He's a guy who's around all the time. Really appreciate all the support. We have Ashton. How are you? It was Ashton. It was her birthday very recently. How are you
Happy
doing?
birthday.
Thanks for checking in. And Lisa, very glad to have you here. Obviously, a big fan of JONNYDEL'S, which is awesome. And we're going to get into some of the topics here. So we did a little bit of like an introduction right there. Kind of before we get into how you kind of started breaking down film, this is actually how I, became familiar with your channel. And we talked a little bit about it before we went live here. Is that so? We both of us, I guess, still kind of, but used to post on this website, 49erswebzone.com. Both of us have been members on there for almost 14 years. And I would actually watch a lot of your videos. I've been watching them for years. And something that I always liked, I think where I really first got introduced to your channel was I was looking for people's thoughts on when we first acquired Jimmy Garoppolo and what people were saying about how, he was looking Kyle Shanahan, because we know the first 5 games, we won all 5 games. He was looking pretty darn good. And I was looking for someone who could kind of give insight on that. And your channel popped up, and I just love, I think my favorite thing to do, and I'm not trying to be a kiss assy or anything like that, but I think my favorite thing is that you kind of make it relatable in terms of like, you break it down where there was some like different, let's say, concepts are different, even like terminology, which I wasn't super familiar with, which you would mention. And then like now I kind of starting to see those things in games. So for example, like a big thing would be, putting, let's say, defenses into like horizontal or vertical stretches, things like that, and really how you can test defenses. So that's something that's kind of come to light. But I do want to ask you, man, so how did you kind of get like started, like really with the in-depth film breakdown?
Really? I mean, it started there on the web zone. And that started in December of 2013 was when I really got into it. What was happening was I had just moved to Alabama from Washington State. I lived there for a number of years, and my dad came down with cancer. And so I was in a place where I was able to go and take care of him. He was living on my sister lives in the middle of nowhere, Oregon, literally in the middle of nowhere, which it is a lot of places in Oregon. People think of Oregon as similar to California, but it's more like there's Portland and then there's the middle of nowhere, and that's pretty much Oregon. And so we were out in the middle of nowhere. In this little house. I was staying with my dad because he was going through all the treatments. And so he needed somebody there a lot. And all I had was a computer and an internet connection, and mostly just a lot of time. And so I thought, well, I've heard that the NFL has this Game Pass subscription where you can look at the coaches film, and it's something I was always interested in. And so I subscribed, started watching it, and started seeing some things. And then that just led to sharing some of those things on the web zone. I'd been a member and commenting for a while, and it kind of took off there. as something that people really liked. I did it for years there, and it really, I'm thankful for that time because it pushed me into learning more. It's one of those things that you know some, and then you realize as you're watching all the things you don't know. And so that pushed me into really, I'd always been really into the X's and O side, but it pushed me to go even deeper and to really dive in. And so, the stuff I've learned over the last 9 years has been just an astronomical as far as for me, where I was to where I am now, learning. And so that's been fun and just an experience and a journey. And it was, I think, 2019, the off season. I was doing things on that forum that it was taking so long to put out clips and annotate and then the GIF to go along with it. I thought if I could do this in a video form, it would be a lot quicker and maybe easier for people to digest. I started doing that. I thought I was going to get like 200 people. It was literally just for people at the web zone. And I thought I was going to get like 200 people watch the channel. I'd be ecstatic if that ever happened. And within a couple months, it was at like 1,000. And I was like, what in the world just happened? And this was in the off season. And
Wow.
so, and I went, okay, well, maybe we could do something, maybe, wow, if it got 2,000, 3,000, hey, that'll blow my mind. That season I started putting stuff out and it grew. A lot of it had to do with us winning. I mean, that thanks for the sub, Ashton. A lot of that had to do with us winning and that people were interested in 49er stuff. So I'm very grateful for that year of all the wins, got enough attention. And then, it's just kind of grown. And this year's been a great year. I came in just under 10,000, I think, or just over 10,000 on the channel. And now we just crossed over the 16,000 threshold this last week. It just blows my mind. Like I still see myself as like a small guy in the space. And I'll probably never stop seeing myself that way, because I see a lot of other content creators doing so much good stuff. And I'm just thankful to be a part of the conversation a lot of days and to be able to add anything in there. But it's been a fun journey. And so, it's just seeing where it goes from here.
I love it, man. I love it. I do have a question for you, but let's get to a couple other people super quick in the comments. Want to give a shout out to Carcast, another content creator. Guys, check him out if you can. He's pretty young in the game, but he's really doing some big things. Daniel DePina, hell yeah, what's happening, dude? Of course, yeah, no problem for the shout out, Ash, and thank you for subscribing too to JONNYDEL'S. You're gonna like a lot of his content. He's really good. And then always faithful. I tune into your guys' show a lot. Keep evolving. Keep doing your guys' thing. I like to check in, and yeah, awesome to have you guys here. So the question that I had for you was, it's a little bit interesting because you mentioned with YouTube, and it kind of started out small and it kind of quickly exploded. And I think the off season can actually be a really good time because you have those football fans who are like starving for like, I just want something maybe a little bit new or a different take. But it is rad just to see how quickly like the channel grew for you. But my question when it comes to the channel is, do you find, and not to get into like a big like numbers thing, but do you find you would get more people typically tuning in after a good game or like a really rough game?
Oh, good game for sure. Um, people are much more interested to see what happened when we do really well. For example, this season after the loss to the Falcons, that is my only review video this year that has less than, I think, 15,000 views. Most of them average between 20 and 30. That one had, I think, 9,000 that week. I mean, it's like half the viewership.
Damn.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big impact. So now, not everyone is that way. Like first week in Chicago, that was one of my most viewed videos. And I think that has something to do with the interest in Trey Lance as his first. This was his first start as the determined starter, right? Like he wasn't coming in because Jimmy Garoppolo was injured. He was the established starter, as they said that during the offseason, and this was his first start, and the game looked rough. And so I think there was some people looking for hope, some people looking for material to dunk on him. And it's just whatever it is, there's engagement there. So that still is, as far as review videos, my most viewed video. And then the second one, the most viewed video this year was when I did one on Brock Purdy. people obviously very interested in that. So it's fascinating to see that through the year on where the engagement is and specific things. So yeah, but yeah, definitely after a win, people are much more interested in it, and they'll watch a lot earlier in the week.
Gotcha.
That's what's always fascinating too. Like a rough loss generally will pick up around Thursday or Friday. A good win, it'll be like the first few hours, people are on this, like, I gotta see this. Other ones like, let's give it a few more days for the wounds to heal.
It's it's one of those things where I always look forward to like when you post a video, and a lot of times I try to make it a point where I know some people will like listen to podcasts and stuff when they're like working out or they're walking or they're commuting or stuff. But for me, it's always a case. I think your stuff is like a lot very visual. So if I'm on like lunch at work or whatever, when I actually have time to kind of focus on it, that's when I watch it. I guess the reason why I asked that question is because so like you and I, we definitely do different things. I think you do like really good in-depth analysis. I do like breakdowns. I just kind of give more like general thoughts on the game. And then I think where I've kind of like maybe started doing like a little bit better is like doing like the live streams. So to me, it's almost like, I think when the game's going well, we do get a lot of great people coming in. But the biggest, let's say, streams that I've had are when the Niners are losing, because
Really?
I think, yeah, you get like a lot of fans of like the other team, and they want to come in, rub salt in the wound, and they want to be like, oh, you guys stink. Or maybe they just want to see someone reacting and being like, oh, what the hell? We suck. Um, yeah, I think the biggest stream that I've had this year, it was either I think it was maybe the Kansas City Chiefs game or maybe the Falcons game. And then I did a video afterwards, and I was kind of like just giving my like immediate thoughts. And that video, I mean, for my channel, got like 5,000 or 6,000 views, and I was like, holy moly! Normally, like a reaction video would be, and I'm grateful honestly for like any view. I love that people tune in and check it out, but normally it might be like 100 or something. And I was like, oh my God, this is like, I'm comments flying through, and I'm like, oh, and but still, I would never ever wish for the Niners to have a bad game just for the sake of views. I think but for me, it's been a wild journey, and I'm sure it's been the same for you, man. Like 16,000 subs. Shout out to you, bud. Keep up the really good work, man. And a lot of people, whether you're a Niner fan or not, I think people can learn watching your channel. But kind of want to move on to the next topic here, and it's thoughts based on the win against Seattle. My guess is that you probably haven't yet had a chance to kind of deep dive into the game yet, but did you watch the game last night, I assume?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
And
was a nervous wreck through a lot of that game. I think it's just from Seattle, like you never
PTSD, man.
like I would have felt a lot better if we were up like 35-6, in the third quarter, because you just know it's Seattle, and something like that team is gonna make it tough, and they did at one point there. It was not a lock, and you're going, okay, come on, is this a stupid Seattle stuff happening again? And because we've been burned so many times there.
Tell me
Um,
about
but
it.
man, it just phenomenal to think about locking up the division, considering that coming into this season, people were assuming the Rams were going to be right there. They're assuming the Cardinals are going to be right there. And San Francisco was viewed as a team that could go deep, but it all depended on their quarterback situation. And the most fascinating thing to me is to see that we are now on our third quarterback of the year. And it's like, oh, I think Shanahan was probably right. We didn't have to get superstar production from the quarterback position from any of these guys to be very successful. That this team really is that good. Look, and I understand why there is a lot of positivity about Brock Purdy. He's done some things very, very well. Let's also be realistic that he is a 7th round pick rookie, and there's that this team is he's a part of the team, and we've said that about Jimmy Garoppolo in the past, and people have said that like it's a detraction on him. You go, that's how this team is built, though, is that they're trying to be built so that they won't rise and fall just off of the play of one player. And I think Kyle has learned that over the years, especially with seeing Jimmy Garoppolo in and out of the lineup so much, that can you build a good enough team to where you're not dependent on one player being there or not. And now, obviously, having a great quarterback makes a big difference. Okay, it was not to say it's not, but I think when you look at, I always go back to why was Trey Lance drafted, and I think it just speaks to the philosophy of how the team was built. And last night is what is seeing the culmination of that. But when Trey Lance is drafted, I've always told people, because people will say it was because of Jimmy Garoppolo's play, and I say I think it was more to do with his health on the field, because and the reason why is Shanahan lost 2 out of 3 seasons to him being on IR. Okay, 2 out of 3 seasons was just gone. I don't think they at that point they would have had a chance for a fourth. So you're looking at, if he has another lost season like that, then it's probably time he moves on. I mean, let's just be realistic about it. If you're an owner and your team has 3 out of 4 bad seasons because you can't keep the most important position in football healthy, that's a problem. You will not have a job. And so I think from there, when you really look at how the team is built, the team has been built as like not quarterback impervious, but to build a deep and strong enough team and scheme around everything to where you can still be successful and we can still find ways to manage and go on. And
Yeah. Oh, I think you might be muted. I can't hear you, bud. I don't know. No, I don't hear you, man. Can you hear me? But I'm going to piggyback a little bit on just while Johnny Dell gets that figured out, is that I think it's been so impressive the way that, and it's actually going to be one of my next topics here, the way that Shanahan and the offense has been really able to like adjust throughout the course of the season. That like you go through like 3 starting quarterbacks, and the way that the Niners have been able to just come through that. All good. Just getting a little update there. But from Johnny Dell, he'll be back in a second. But all good, man. But yeah, so I think it's been so impressive by the way the 49ers have been able to adjust on the fly, essentially, that like you start off the season with Trey Lance, you spend the whole off season basically focused on, building the offense around him, what he can do with his mobility, with his arm strength, and then to really just, again, on the fly, look, Trey Lance unfortunately goes down and out for the count for the season. We're obviously all wishing him a speedy recovery. And then you kind of have to jump back to Garoppolo. And it's a thing where, like, quarterbacks, like I think any athlete, I think one of the biggest things you could say is that they're absolutely creatures of habit. So, but while we're also waiting for Johnny Dell, let's get back to some of the comments in here. So, Ashton, she started Brock Purdy last night. Wonder if that was a good idea, bad idea, depending on how Allen. See, I love the confidence in going for Brock Purdy, but yeah, I love the confidence that you wanted to start Brock Purdy when it comes to fantasy. But I would have gone. I'm assuming by Allen you mean Josh Allen or Joe Burrow. I would have gone them. But I love the faith right there. Let me know, Johnny, whenever you're ready. It kind of got you back in here. And then always faithful, yeah, says honestly, it's better to learn from losses than wins by watching the film. However, Johnny Dell is great at explaining the mistakes that were made on film. Absolutely, 100%. Let me just and then so yeah, I think it's the really good thing which I like about Johnny Dell's work is basically that too, where it's like, there's always opportunities to improve, and like any sport, there's no such thing as a perfect sport. There's no such thing as having the perfect game. It's maybe baseball being the exception, but even then you're going to throw balls. So I think when it comes down to it, like the Niners have just been able to do such a good job all year long. And we have Randy here. Randy, how is it going? People were predicting 8-9 early this season. Yeah, I think a lot of people were predicting 8-9 early this year, and then especially once once Trey Lance went down, I think people were just completely confused by like, hey, what's going to happen the rest of the season? but this team is just so talented overall that we were able to like overcome a lot of the issues, the injuries. And it's not even just at the quarterback position. We've been injured like all over the roster. So, and then Pity's NSCI says, would have been worried if they still had Russell Wilson play. There's something about Russell Wilson, man, that with the Seahawks in Seattle, like there's just been so many games where we've just looked awful that it's really hard to keep up with it. And, you know, but 49ers Ultimate Report, this guy, 49ers Ultimate Report, John Jay, one of my favorite dudes in the YouTube 49ers community. Check out his channel. Do subscribe. This guy is awesome. One of the hardest working guys on YouTube in the 49er community. So shout out to you, John Jay from 49ers Ultimate Report. And then, yes, I would definitely start Josh Allen or Joe Burrow. Love me some Brock Purdy, but fantasy purposes, especially if you have money on the line in fantasy, yeah, Josh Allen or Joe Burrow would be the way to go. But Johnny, you're good. You're back.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you. Yeah, you're good, man.
Okay. I don't know what happened. My computer just froze and shut down. That's the first time that's ever happened. So no idea what's going on. Live
good, dude. All good. I held it down and just kind of went through some of the comments. But yeah, I think you were making some really, really good points before you kind of cut out there that you know, I just think that being able to like Shanahan's like offense and just the talent of the team it makes it like almost quarterback like proof where it's like, you know, you maybe like, of course, if you have an elite quarterback, any offense will happily take that, but it's being able to adjust. And like, look, we all know Garoppolo, to me, even though statistically having a good year, I think we all know he has his limitations. Brock Purdy as well, to a certain degree. All things considered, Brock Purdy's playing fantastic, but at the end of the day, we still have only seen him play regular season football for about 11 quarters. We've kind of gotten a little bit lucky at times too with certain throws, but I guess every quarterback does. But one of the things that you mentioned in one of your videos, and I think it was the breakdown against the Dolphins game, which I really liked, and it's a good point. And it was that what Brock Purdy needs to learn is if there's one thing that he can really do to help out the team, it's looking at the situation and looking at the context of the situation. So I think it was was it the fourth quarter, and Brock Purdy kind of takes an unnecessary sack, which almost pushes us out of field goal range. And to me, I just think of the fact that like we've seen it by Jimmy Garoppolo. He's made those back-breaking mistakes. They haven't always cost us the game, but I think back to playoffs last year against Dallas, the fourth quarter bad interception. I think he was looking for Trent Sherfield. I look at the Green Bay Packers playoff game before halftime, trying to make a play to Kittle, and it's just badly underthrown. And I think that, I mean, you got to respect like the fact that Jimmy wants to make a play, but also sometimes the best play is live another down. You know, you can always bounce back the next play. You can always take 3 points if you need to. And when you're backed up by the best defense in football, a lot of times, you know, maybe 3 points is better than having to force it, you know? So, but yeah, I just wanted to kind of get to that now. I think that on your channel, and I think a lot of people have, you know, rightfully so, been focusing on the quarterback, and because there's been so many changes, but kind of actually want to talk a little bit more because I know you cover both sides of the ball. So talking a little bit about DeMeco Ryans, what would you say, is there anything that really stands out to you that's different in what he does defensively from last year to this year?
Yeah, I would say, you know, what you saw last year was that it was like he was really focused on every play winning the chess match as far as having the perfect defense called against what he thought the offense was going to do. And this year it feels more like trusting the guys on the field to know their assignments and execute their assignments. One thing about our defense is we play a matching zone coverage. It's very similar to like what Nick Saban does at Alabama, or what he did with Bill Belichick when he was Belichick's defensive coordinator, or how the Patriots will run a lot of their zones. Or you know, Pete Carroll is the same thing. A lot of matching rules. And I think this is the part of the game that people often, I think, either don't fully understand, or it's not talked about enough to where people understand what is going on out there. Because at this level, and even in like when you're talking Division I football in college, the defenses are extremely complex. And there's rules, very specific rules that guys have. So, if, for example, like not to try and get too far in the weeds on this, like for example, you can have what's called a bronco or a skiff call to a certain player, and that means that they're going to have certain rules of if the number 2 or number 3 receiver is threatening them vertical, then they have to carry that for X amount of yards before they will break a certain direction, or if there's another route that's a certain way, then they have to carry that route indefinitely. And it's adjusting these things on the fly, that you have to in this certain coverage, this guy has to play this route this certain way in zone coverage. He's got to play outside leverage and then break to an underneath leverage if it breaks inside, kind of a thing. That there's so many different matching rules going on that, because somebody asked me about the coverage breakdown that happened on the touchdown that was called back against the Buccaneers. What happened on that busted coverage? And I told people, I said, I can't really tell you, because it would be, sometimes you can look at those and you can see, okay, yeah, this is where the bust happened. That was one of those plays I couldn't tell, because I don't know exactly what their calls are going to be. If it's a Bronco call or it's a Cora call, something like that. I don't know, because there was like three people it could have been. And so it just depends. They're going to know that in the meeting room. I don't know that from looking at it. And I don't think anybody who doesn't know that call is going to necessarily know that. So anyways, all that to circle back around, that with Ryan's, before it was like, okay, if they're going to be coming with a sale concept, I've got to be in this defense, instead of saying we have the matching rules to beat that in 2 different coverages. Our guys have to execute that. Now, it may be a tough job to execute, but it's trusting his players to do that. So in a lot of ways, the defense looks a little more simplified, in the sense of we're not trying to guess the offensive call each time. We're going to be in our defense, and we're going to play sound assignment football. And so that means that in the complexity, you are very sound in that, and you execute it really well. And it's about D'Amico trusting his players on the field. That's what you kind of screams at you from the film, is he is trusting his players on the field to execute their assignments, even though it's extremely complex. So you're seeing a little bit less diversity in the call than I think you would see from snap to snap, or even series to series, but you're seeing it executed at a really high level. And that, I think, is what's really, taking this defense to another level.
Now, let me ask you this, because you make some really, really good points there. Do you think that, and my guess is it's probably a bit of both, but do you think it's a case of D'Amico has kind of, learned to trust his players? Or do you think it's simply the case of, if we look back to last year, especially in terms of coverages, first game of the season, the first maybe quarter, second quarter, Verrett done, and he was supposed to be our starting guy. Emmanuel Mosley missed a bunch of games last year as well. So we were trotting out Josh Norman, who we just brought in, Lenore, a rookie cornerback. So he's obviously going to make mistakes. Ambry Thomas, Dre Kirkpatrick, like these guys are, we know that like Josh Norman back in Carolina had some good years. Dre Kirkpatrick, former first round pick. But at the end of the day, like these guys are not elite players, I'll just put it that way, to be a little bit nice. When you compare it to this year, when you have like Mooney Ward, who's a guy who I'm just so impressed by what he does each game that he's out there. Look, of course, Mosley's gone down. I think Lenore has really stepped up. But to me, maybe it's he kind of trusts that he kind of maybe has like the quality of players out there as well, especially in the secondary, like Hufanga. He has, he can, sometimes he misses tackles, over pursues, things like that. But, Hufanga's making plays, and maybe he likes this personnel a little bit more from a talent perspective. They can run what he wants to run more. And I think where that to me was a little bit like on show was that when you look at the Falcons game, it was the first game after Mosley was out for the year. And then Mooney Ward, I think he missed a bunch of, I think he was really in and out of that game. I think he missed maybe at least half the game. So, and we really struggled in that. So I think, do you think it's maybe a case of like he's kind of learned to just trust his guys, or it's a case of like he's like, well, now I can kind of trust these guys because just these guys are just so freaking good?
Yeah, I think they're one and the same. The talent on the field allows you to trust your guys more. But I think what he's done better at this year is not overreacting to when guys are dropping in and out. He's not just saying, okay, now I have to run a completely different defense, or sort of thing. And I do think there's growth in the system because, transitioning from Sala to Ryan's, it was the same basic ideas, but we really transitioned from a primarily single high defense to a primarily two high defense. And you've really seen that happen this year. Now that's something that's going around the league. It's very much the Fangio style defense is very much going on around the league. And Ryan's has been in that, and I don't think it's any coincidence that Fangio was around the facility this offseason. We're playing very much his style of defense, a lot of the rules of his defense and ideas around it. But I think they're one and the same, and like you said, Mooney Ward has really given to me, if I would say that if there was one change from last year to this year that has made the biggest difference, it would be Mooney Ward. That he is a guy that he allows you the comfort, like he's what we wanted Richard Sherman to be. And that's not taking anything away from Richard Sherman. It's where he was in his career at that point, especially 2020, that there, it was just his health, it was not there. His explosiveness was not there. Ever since that Achilles that he had in Seattle, he was just not the same player. He could still play zone very, very, very well, but he was not a guy then that you could put in man and move around the field, and you could legitimately, say he's going to be able to move step for step with a lot of guys. But we saw in zone, man, nope, it was like the black hole when you look at the spray charts of quarterbacks where they'd throw. There was like this black hole over in Richard Sherman's area, because in deep third zone, there's nobody who's been better than him in the history of the NFL, I don't think. But Mooney Ward allows Ryans to say, because we put so much on our corners, and if you notice now, you're starting to see Mooney Ward travel. And it's not always shadow. Now, we saw him travel with DK Metcalf last night, but it's not just with DK Metcalf at times. And it's not even with specific receivers. Sometimes we're putting him to what we call the field side. So that's the side of the field that has the most space. Like if you're on one hash mark, it's the hash mark, not the one that's closest to the boundary. We call that the boundary side. So we're putting him in the area where it is toughest to cover, because that allows us to keep doing our matching zones, because he's going to be able to, because a lot of those on the outside end up converting to man coverage after a certain depth. And so you're putting your best cover guy in, and he's allowed Ryan so much flexibility in that, and the ability to trust his players. So, he's been a huge addition. Hopefully his head's going to be okay. And, thankfully he has 10 days to recover. He cleared the concussion protocol, but I'm glad that he has 10 days to recover right now.
Absolutely. And I think, again, some really good points there. And, it kind of segues on, I kind of answered the next segue already, but coming down to who do you think was the biggest addition to the starting defense? We all know Hufanga was with the team in 2021. Would you say that in terms of like the impact they've had on the defense, do you think like having Hufanga out there or Mooney Ward, would you kind of stick with Mooney Ward on that?
I would. I mean, now Hufanga has been great this year, but I think it's almost like baseball has wins over expectation. That I think that's what Mooney Ward gives you more of, is that Hufanga over Tart isn't as much of an improvement as Mooney Ward over Josh Norman, over Ambry Thomas, that kind of improvement. To me, that's a much, much bigger jump than Hufanga over Tart. Tart was not a bad player. He was a very solid player. Now, he didn't have the splash plays that you're seeing from Hufanga, so that's been good to see and that he's brought. But I think as far as the single, improvement over who was there, it's Ward by a mile.
And yeah, I'll kind of give my thoughts on that in a moment. Let's get to the comments a little bit quickly. Yeah, always faithful. I think it's a blend of both. D'Amico allows them to play loose, but attentively that kind of goes back to, is it a case of we just have more talented players that allows D'Amico to trust the guys, or is he just kind of putting faith in in the defensive calls? And then I agree, Johnny Dell, regarding the Mooney Ward addition. Daniel Berry Sports Highlights. Yo, how's it going, buddy? Good to have you here. And then, yeah, this is a question that we'll get to next. I think I wanted to talk a little bit about that last point with regards to Hufanga and Ward. I would tend to agree. Something that I just absolutely love that Hufanga's brought to the team is just those crazy like splash plays defensively that we were really, really missing. I was always a Jaquaski Tart fan. I think he was solid guy, kind of the guy who's typically right place at the right time. Kind of knows where he needs to be. He's not going to blow too many coverages, like really smart player. Of course, not to bring up a sore wound, but the NFC Championship game, sometimes the plays that were there to be made weren't always made. And then, but something that kind of takes me back to when people kind of harp on Jaquaski Tart is I just think back to that Green Bay game in the playoffs right before halftime. Green Bay has the huge play downfield, and it was Tart who got there and basically made the tackle. And ultimately, we ended up blocking the field goal before halftime in that playoff game. But those are the plays that, like, you don't necessarily on the stat sheet, you'll get credited for a tackle. And even like, oh, the tackle was like 60 yards down the field. So, but it saved us potentially a touchdown or at least 3 points, So I like Jaquaski Tart. I'm kind of surprised. I think he's a free agent right now still.
He is, yeah. Yeah,
Which
he floated
kind of,
with Philadelphia for a little while, but ended up getting cut.
yeah, I'm pretty surprised by that. But, so what I love about Hufanga is that, of course, yeah, Hufanga has brought like interceptions. He had I think it was week 2, he had the deflection on, then it went up to Gibson, intercepted it week 2 against the Seahawks. But what I also like about Hufanga too is, and I think that I can't remember with how much consistency that D'Amico or even Sala brought Tart in terms of like blitzing, but Hufanga's up there a lot by the line of scrimmage. Now, you also make a really good point that I think we do a lot of like that 2 safety look, but I do see, and there's a number of times last night where Hufanga was like right there. And even not only Hufanga, but we're seeing Jimmy Ward come as well in a lot of blitzes too, which I think it's good to see because it's an added wrinkle that maybe offenses just have to think about now. But I do like Hufanga's playmaking ability, but I'd have to agree that especially with like considering the unfortunate injury to Mosley, that having Mooney Ward there is just, it's funny. Like I don't necessarily think Mooney Ward like shuts down a side of the field, but pretty damn close to it. Like teams are still challenging him. And DK Metcalf, I don't care what cornerback you are, that's not an easy matchup from like a size standpoint, speed standpoint, physicality standpoint, and he's just a damn good receiver too. So what he did last night was really impressive. As you said, I really just hope that he, maybe he sits against Washington. I don't know. To me, I think the 49ers absolutely should shoot for like the number 2 seed in the NFC. If you can get 2 home games in the playoffs, that's a whole lot better than 1. So I'd like him out there, but I think the beautiful thing now is that we don't have to rush anyone back. But of course, like I want to beat the Commanders. So,
well, and the interesting thing to me, and just kind of looking at the playoff standings, is if you get that number 2 seed, and if Philadelphia ends up matching up against the Commanders, who the Commanders beat Philadelphia, they're vulnerable. I mean, so that number 2 seed is potentially to host the NFC Championship game.
True.
So to me, you go for the highest seed you can because, Philadelphia, yes, they have looked really good. And to me, they have, it's hard to say the best receiver in the league, but, AJ Brown reminds me of Terrell Owens. Just everything about him just reminds me of Terrell Owens. And, they're tough, but the Commanders showed that they can go toe to toe with them and they can beat them. So, it'd be really fascinating to me if you have those 2 matched up to see, does San Francisco have the chance to host the NFC Championship game? Because I mean, shoot, if you're looking at, you're rolling into the NFC Championship game with Brock Purdy, the ideal situation is to be at home. So I think you push to get as many wins as you can.
And so one of the things I remember that draft, the 2019 draft, I was actually a bigger fan of AJ Brown than Debo in that draft. But both players have come out to be amazing in their own right, and I think that ultimately, we hit a home run with Debo Samuel. You have to be happy with what the production that Debo's had from the 49ers, and hopefully he can come back fully healthy at least for the playoffs, if not sooner, to help us out again with that seeding. But yeah, I was a big fan of AJ Brown. I remember in the pre-draft process, AJ Brown actually ran with Jerry Rice and they did all this like crazy stuff. And I was like, man, he just seems like the perfect Niner, and we drafted Debo but Debo's been a home run hit. But very quickly, so of course, when it comes to who's replacing D'Amico, because I think it's fair to assume that D'Amico's he's for sure going to be offered head coaching jobs. The question,
Absolutely.
I think the only saving grace that maybe the 49ers have will be like, maybe with the openings available, he's like, I don't want to go there. But at the end of the day, I think we kind of have to, start planning for the future. And of course, the obvious name that we've heard, and he was there, you mentioned earlier, Vic Fangio. And, he's been a, defensive coordinator with the 49ers during the Harbaugh years. I think a lot of similar concepts, definitely known for like the 3-4. But is there anyone other than D'Amico or other than Vic Fangio that you think could potentially, that's maybe been on your radar, that could be a possible defensive coordinator?
To me, I guess a lot of it kind of comes down to how the rest of the season plays out and what ends up happening, with the possible vacancies. What teams do lose their defensive staff, and which ones are going to be out there. I think that's a question that's hard for me to answer because I wonder, obviously Vic Fangio is the name that everybody thinks of, especially with us playing coverage style very much like his. The big question, like you said, is the 3-4. Is Vic able to do base defense out, not in a 3-4? The interesting thing about the wide 9 that we do is that it's basically, as Jim Schwartz, he was kind of the founder of the wide 9, that he talked about, that essentially what they decided was they wanted to play a 4-3 with 3-4 principles. So those wide 9 ends, sorry, in a wide 9, they essentially play like the same responsibilities as outside linebackers in the run game, for a 3-4 defense. And then the difference is that you don't have that nose tackle. So that does change some of your safety fits, some of your inside run fits. And so is that something that Vic is wanting to change? Because Vic's, done the 3-4 for a lot of decades. Expecting the guy to change up his base defense. Now, we're only in base about 30% of the time. So how much of a hurdle is that? I know he's got a lot of respect for the Shanahan family. I know that when we were looking at hiring and we ended up hiring Chip Kelly, that the only person that it was when we hired Tom Sula, that the only person that Vic was willing to stay for was Mike Shanahan. If we ended up hiring Mike Shanahan, we didn't. But it's all worked out in the end. But so that there's a respect there. I think that would be a logical choice if he's able to do a wide 9, because I don't see us transitioning base to a 3-4. Now, it might be possible with the loss of Al-Shaair. I do not see us keeping him in the offseason. I think he's going to go make himself some good money. So you're looking at, you're losing this guy. We have the personnel to play the 5 techniques in a 3-4. It would be about adding a nose. You lose Al-Shaair, you add a nose, and can they make that transition? I think they could. Will they? I don't know. Because what happens with a Bosa in a 3-4? To me, you run whatever scheme fits Bosa. So you're going to be looking for to me, if I was Kyle Shanahan and I was looking for a defensive coordinator, the first thing I would ask when they walk in the room is, how are you going to use Nick Bosa? That would be my number one priority, that he is kept in a position to succeed. And we've seen Joey Bosa in a 3-4. I don't think that's ideal. I don't think that was ideal for him. I think running him as an end would be the absolute best way to go. So as far as who does, I think that's a better question for in about 5 weeks when we start seeing some front office and coaching positions vacated and then staffs dismissed. I think they're going to find somebody, and there's always the possibility of promoting from within. I don't know how they feel about their defensive staff on that. So we'll see. I mean, they've had a good track record so far.
Yeah, and I think you made a good point too about Al Shire. He's probably not going to be coming back. I mean, we have, of course, Warner. We locked up Greenlaw as well for on an extension. We still have Oren Burks, who I think has done quite well in limited time. And I assume that Flanagan Foles is on just a 1-year deal, but he's someone who could always we could bring back. But I think what you're going to see a lot of is wherever D'Amico goes, you're probably going to see a lot of former 49ers just go with him, essentially. Like, to me, let's say if he were to go to Houston, right? He was drafted by the Texans, familiarity with the organization. D'Amico was. They should have a lot of cap space. I don't know who they're really paying out there besides for Laramie Tunsil, maybe Brandon Cooks. But I wouldn't be surprised if they throw money at like Emmanuel Mosley, Al Shire, bring all these guys here who can help implement the system. Maybe some of the DNs, because a lot of our DNs are going to be free agents at the end of the year. Maybe Ebukam, someone like that. But I think it is like an interesting question to pose. As you said, Fangio, from like a familiarity, from a respect aspect and point that I think you'd like to think that he'd be willing to coach with Kyle Shanahan. Just a matter of, how do you use Bosa? And when it comes to that base defense, like, can he kind of like adjust to that on the fly? Now, very quickly, we'll go through a couple of more comments. If the Packers beat the Rams, defending champ, I mean, their days are already over. I mean, half their players are on like, no Cup, no Stafford, Baker Mayfield, all right, we'll see what happens there. But I think the Packers win that game for sure, but we'll see. Now, to go back to the next question, and so CMC's impact on the offense, I think it's been like astronomical, really. Even from the get-go against Kansas City, he was here for 48 hours and he still had like a pretty notable impact on the game. To me, what I just love about CMC is, I mean, he is like that all-around guy. He's a bit like he's kind of like a Deebo Samuel, but just like you can put him in so many different positions and he causes just so many issues on the field. And I think that's where the Niners offense is just at its best, when you have, like, if you have CMC, Deebo, Kittle, Ayuk, and Juszczyk on the field, you're like, well, we don't know what the hell's coming at us. Like, we have no clue. We have to basically prepare for anything and everything. And that's just been like another huge aspect, something that I just think is really simple. And I noticed it in the game at the Rams, is that like Jimmy Garoppolo would like dump it off to CMC. And I think a lot of running backs, maybe it's a 3 or 4 yard gain. With CMC, 11, 12 yard gain. He just has that ability to, extend plays, break tackles, really athletic. But what were some of the things that you've seen, let's say in the Niners offense, like pre-Christian McCaffrey and then post-Christian McCaffrey?
I think it just gives you that player that you don't feel like you have to manage. Sometimes with Jeff Wilson, Kyle would talk about that you're kind of managing him because you don't want to put too much load on him because they've known of injury problems, right? And now Christian McCaffrey was banged up the last couple of years, but if you look at the years before that, he was extremely healthy. He's also a guy that you never, ever have to take off the field. He reminds me so much of Marshall Faulk. And when people remember the greatest show on turf, Marshall Faulk is always seen as a piece of that. And I think Marshall Faulk was the engine for that. Kurt Warner was great. Torrey Holt, great. Isaac Bruce, great. Marshall Faulk, legendary. Okay. Because he gives you answers for everything. He's a guy that you can put anywhere and he gives you an answer. No matter what the defense is doing, he gives you an answer. And I think that's what you're seeing, like what you say with Garoppolo, that we saw Jimmy playing the best ball of his career, in the sense of the mistakes of forcing things were not there, because you always have McCaffrey as an answer. If, because like, look, there's times Kyle gets beat schematically, right? There's just it happens to every coach. Christian McCaffrey's still an answer. Even when you're beat schematically, Christian McCaffrey's an answer, because there is no good answer for that. And when you have answered Christian McCaffrey, then you've got everybody else open. And that's when you're opening things up for everybody else. And you just look at the impact with the offense, especially at points per game. Since he's been there, it's something like 6.5, 7 points per game of an impact since he's been there. That is a huge impact. Like that's an impact that takes you from like 22nd in the league in scoring to like 4th in the league in scoring. I mean, that's a huge difference. And it's because you run zone, you're going to be able to use him to win against zone. You're going to be able to use him in the run game. You force the defense to have to account for him in every single way. They run man, you have answers in man. They're going to double him. Now you're open somewhere else. You're going to have your zones, spy on him. Now other zones have more space to work, right? Or players have more space to work in between their zones. So he gives you an answer for everything. It just reminds me, like, I think back to, there was one play that Mike Martz used to run with Marshall Faulk a lot. It's called the short post. We have a version of it called arches, and that play, you have answers versus zone, you have answers versus man, all from Marshall Faulk. And if teams start selling out too much on that, then you can do other things with Torrey Holt and Isaac Bruce. If they don't, then you still have the ability to run. If they're bringing in extra coverage guys, like, he's that kind of player that gives you answers. And that's why you're seeing the big impact that he has.
Yeah. And it's one of those things too. And like, the play that really stood out to me last night, when you just look at Christian McCaffrey's impact, I think he had maybe 90 plus, almost 100 rushing yards, a bunch of receiving yards, but it was actually a play where he didn't even get the ball. To me, one of the big plays was, I think it was the first touchdown to George Kittle, where snap is away, kind of fake the toss out to Ray. You come back to McCaffrey, and the defense just immediately swarms that way. And then Kittle's like, bam, open down the middle. And then pretty easy touchdown for Kittle just to finish that playoff. So he just draws so much attention. And I think that's where the 49ers have just this level of talent on offense with the different players. It's like, who do you cover? Like, who do you, in terms of, like, a lot of times when you see teams, you might be like, okay, we can just focus on this guy. And if we can shut him down, man, we should be in business. But if you're like, hey, we're going to shut down McCaffrey, well, you have Kittle, you have Ayuk, you have, all these other players. So I think he's been like such a huge addition to the team. And as you pointed out, like, our points per game jumped up basically a touchdown per game, which is huge for any team, regardless of the situation. But you back that up with the best defense in football. 7 points is massive. Like, for any team to even score 7 points on the 49ers, it takes a lot to score set. I mean, the Niners were giving up 15 points per game. So just the increase from McCaffrey is basically on average about half the points we give up per game. So absolutely huge. Now, I do want to say, from Always Faithful, I think by far Hufanga was the biggest unexpected starting addition. I think that's like a really good compromise right there. I mean, Mooney Ward's been amazing, but Hufanga really making those plays has really helped out the team a lot. Randy says, I believe we have 9 picks. Yeah, we have a bunch of draft picks next year. If assuming D'Amico gets hired as a head coach, I think we'll have 3 third-round compensatory picks, and then we have 5th round, 6th round, 7th round. But yeah, and that was one of the things with the trade for McCaffrey. And while we're still on that topic with McCaffrey, at first, I think we all knew that McCaffrey is a really good player. I guess, like, being honest, I was like a little bit skeptical, not because I didn't think he was a good fit or he wouldn't have like necessarily an impact, but our luck with injuries, and I'm knocking on wood here because I want McCaffrey to stay healthy through as long as possible. But not only that, we did give up quite a few picks, like a 2nd, a 3rd, a 4th, and then a 5th next year. And you could always make the argument that, well, Shanahan can get production out of running backs. They could be undrafted guys. You look at Jordan Mason in the past, Matt Breida, Elijah Mitchell is a late round draft pick. But I think CMC has really just brought out like a whole new dimension to this offense, which just makes it so much more difficult to stop and slow down. And I want to give Brock Purdy his credit, and I think he's been really good. But there's a reason why you can have a 7th round rookie come in and look pretty darn good. I think a lot of it coaching, and a lot of it too just having so many weapons around him. Like watching against the Buccaneers when Debo was out there before he went down, it was like, how do you stop this team? And this is with the Mr. Irrelevant quarterback. It's insane. But I just love the impact, and I think one of the things too, which I read, is when the trade went through, is just clearly how happy and stoked Christian McCaffrey was just to be with the 49ers. Of course, Ed McCaffrey played with the 49ers. His dad, I think it was his dad or his uncle's Ed.
His dad, Ed McCaffrey, yeah.
And playing at Stanford, very close to Santa Clara. So great to have him on board. And man, yeah, Christian McCaffrey has been just such an awesome addition to the team. And I think the big key now is if we can lock up Ayuk, then man, just you look like going forward, you can kind of plug in whoever else on offense and they're going to perform. But even still, we have just so many weapons. Like I think Ray's been playing very well, especially on special teams lately. I mean, I've been very critical, of the special teams, especially early on, but Ray seems like every time we get let's say if the other team punts it, like he's picking up 10, 15 yards, which is just so key. I mean, just the field position, instead of starting at your own 15, you're starting at the 30 and bam, only 1 or 2 first downs and you're in scoring position. So the team is really coming together in such a great way. And maybe not that you want any of the injuries, but sometimes when you have that like devastating injury, that the guys just kind of come closer together almost and rally around each other, and just been awesome to see. But let's see. CMC can be used in so many different ways. Yeah, he has that. Kyle Shanahan always playing chess against the defense. And that's one of my favorite things too that you do in your videos, is there'll be certain plays that you'll highlight. And it's just like, man, I can't imagine how much time and effort that these coaches put into like drawing up these plays. And not only like drawing up the plays, that's one thing, but kind of like knowing which situation to use them in to be most effective. So it's really awesome when you highlight that. You're like, hey, this is the perfect time to call this play. And bam, it worked out really well. Those guys plugged into Kyle's system are one-year wonders, though. No, I'm trying to think which guys. I mean, I guess, the running backs, probably the late round. I mean, well, Breda, he had a couple of good years. And I think it's more a case of like sometimes when the guys leave Shanahan, that they maybe kind of tail off a little bit, that if they were to stick around or if we were to hold on to them, that I think they'd still be productive. But some players are still doing very well. I mean, Raheem Mostert's had some, good games with Mike McDaniel. So yeah. And also we got to give Bobby Turner. I mean, he's like the running back guru. Anthony Lynn has also been really, really good as well. And Brian Greasy too. Let's give a shout out to Brian Greasy. So a couple of more very quickly, we're going to do this question and then a couple of fun ones to end off the show. But who would you say, one player in offense, one player in defense, who is your most underrated player each side of the ball?
Most underrated player on offense? That one's hard because you have so many good names and so many people that are rated really well, that I'm not seeing a lot of people that are like really giving shade on offense. Man, that one's tough because it's like I could say Banks, Brendel, Burford, but they both had ups and downs, and so I think they've been deserving of some of the criticism, and they've deserved some of the praise. I think we've got a pretty level understanding who they are. I'd say same thing with a lot of our skilled position players. It's hard for me to say there's an underrated player on offense. On defense, I would say probably Samson Ebukam. That there's so many plays that you see him pressuring the quarterback, but he is not getting the sack numbers, and Bosa is getting all the attention. I would say Ebukam or Tayshaun Gibson. They both been very, very solid players, and guys that are getting sneaky production. Givens has been very good on defense. The only reason I don't give it to Givens is because we're seeing generally the defensive line, a lot of the reserve role guys are all playing very well. Now Givens is playing very, very solid. I think he's playing his assignment very, very well. But it's not like I'm seeing him do things that we're not seeing a huge drop off when he's not in there. Kerry Hyder's been doing what he's been doing pretty well, not quite the same way as Gibson or as Givens, but he's doing pretty well. to me, Ebukam is that guy that when you put anybody else on the edge, we're not getting quite the same production as Ebukam. For example, that interception the first interception that Brady threw to Gibson, that was 100% affected by Ebukam. He brings pressure off the edge. Brady steps up. He's off platform. He's not in a great throwing position. He tries to make the throw and it sails high. I think on the broadcast they brought it up about his hand, getting hit, but that hand was not why he threw that ball too high. It was 100% because he was not in a good throwing position, and that was forced by Ebukam. He's been opening things up for other guys. He's been a fantastic role player. So to me, I would say the most underrated player on our team is Samson Ebukam.
Yeah, I think that I really like that choice there, because something that I noticed too, especially down the stretch last season into the playoffs, like if you look at that game, especially against the Cowboys and the Packers in the playoffs, and even against the Rams week 18, like Ebukam kind of gets a little bit unlucky because he doesn't always get the sack numbers that maybe he deserves. But if you look at, I'll focus in on the playoff games, Dallas and Green Bay. Bosa got sacks. I think DJ Jones, maybe Armstead. But every time, who was right beside him? Number 56, Ebukam was like right there all the time. And I did like one of those just like kind of crazy prediction videos before the start of the season. I actually had Ebukam getting into double-digit sack numbers. Now, I think, is he deserving? Is it still possible? Yeah, unlikely, though, considering. But I think he's definitely deserving of it. And just with the amount of pressures and quarterback hits he gets, it's almost kind of crazy how he hasn't got there. But I really like Ebukam. Now, when it comes to me in terms of like underrated, and I guess when I mean underrated, I mean kind of by like the general like NFL audience. Of course, everyone knows about, Bosa and like the star players. But to me, I think that someone who's just done such a great job stepping up is probably Diamador Lenore. Look, when Mosley went down, like Lenore was playing, I think, a lot of it in the slot, and he was doing pretty well in the slot before Mosley went down. But I think when Mosley went down, I know for myself, I was kind of like, when's Verrett back? When's Verrett back? When's Verrett back? And then if we know what happened, unfortunately, like maybe the unluckiest player with injuries in NFL history with Jason Verrett. But I think Lenore's done really, really good. Has he been perfect? No player is. But I think Lenore's done a fantastic job. And I saw a couple of stats, like he hasn't given up a touchdown since he's been like in that starting role, really limiting players. And, maybe, and I haven't watched, like the game again. I tried to watch the Seattle game again, but I don't really remember Lenore being challenged too much last night, number one. And number two, he did have that interception return for a touchdown. Of course, it was called back from the roughing the passer, which that I was like, that call would kind of grind in my gears a little bit, because I'm like, if you call that roughing the passer, I mean, look, I'm gonna digress. I'm not gonna let out frustration on that, because I feel bad, because Lenore should have had a pick six, and that would have put the game away, because then it would have been 28-6 or something. But either way, here or there, I think Lenore's been really, really good. Now, offensively, I think it's you mentioned him, and he's had ups and downs. I mean, I would probably lean towards Aaron Banks. I think he's been really good. Really just like Laken Tomlinson was just such like a good, solid, stabilizing force at left guard. And I think Aaron Banks, he's had moments where, yeah, he struggled. I think there was even a couple of times last night where like some pressure came and the guy got around Banks. But overall, I think he's just been a really good addition there. And I love his attitude. He's kind of taken on the mentality of a Trent Williams. I think Banks realizes just how big and strong and athletic he is. I'm not saying he's on Trent Williams level, but in terms of talent, but I think he's taken on that mentality of like, I'm going to try and dominate you, which you love to see from any offensive lineman, but especially an interior offensive lineman. And that's something too, that like very quickly, maybe it's just me, but I feel like I see us running up the middle a lot more than like previous years with Shanahan. Like I'm so used to that like outside zone, but this year it's been like, even if it's a pitch, but it's a pitch and it's like up the middle. Now I'm kind of wondering, and this is just a quick thought that I had, but how the NFL, sometimes when you zig, you got to zag. When the other people zig, you got to zag. So the NFL went from like, linebackers used to be 250 pounds. Like Patrick Willis was like your prototypical guy. now you see linebackers, they're all like 220, and they're kind of like just basically like how safeties used to be. But maybe it's a case of like when you do that outside zone, well, you have a whole bunch of athletic guys who can just go there. Whereas now, if you have, and you drafted Aaron Banks, and Burford's a big dude as well, that maybe because linebackers are getting smaller, you want to get bigger in terms of up the middle, bigger running backs. Is that something that maybe I'm just talking myself into it? But
No, I think you got some there. Personally, I think the move to smaller linebackers is to try and find the next Patrick Willis. As far as speed on defense, to me, I'm a big believer that Patrick Willis deserves to be in the Hall of Fame because the modern era of linebacker has been to recreate Patrick Willis. Can you get the kind of speed that Patrick Willis had from the linebacker position? I think the play that made us all go, okay, this kid's special was back in his rookie year when he ran down a wide receiver against Arizona.
I remember that game.
And ever since then, you are seeing what was done with Patrick Willis there at the end of the 2000s, that teams have been trying to find that kind of speed at the linebacker position of what it brings to the table. As far as with the more interior running, I think a lot of that has to do with we're seeing a lot more five techniques. Five technique create a problem in that wide zone because that's a really hard defender to account for in the wide zone. And so I think with that, you're seeing more interior stuff where you're able to get better angles on those five techniques, or we're doing like that toss inside zone where it's going to have the backfield action of a wide zone. You get that five technique to move into the C gap or D gap, and now you're able to cut inside of them. I think that's a lot of what we're seeing with that is that, and with this Fangio scheme, a lot of times those five techniques are going to take over that D gap. Whereas, and the safeties are responsible for the C, having that Fangio style two safeties, because a lot of times they're inside shade of the tight end. So therefore they can get up in a run fit in the C gap really quickly. And so I think that's what a lot of what you're seeing is that Fangio style is moving through. Plus, you're seeing more teams knowing that wide zone, they're going to be playing a lot of five techniques. And so, formationally, they're doing things to get to that place. A lot of them will do it different ways, but they're still trying to do that. And I think that's why you're seeing so much more interior running.
Love it, man. Love it. Good stuff. Yeah. I was just one of the things, I was just thinking about that. Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. And I feel like this season, and maybe it's one of the reasons why we've kind of gone away from it, that defenses, I feel like they played whenever we have kind of done like those sweeps out to the either side, or if it is that outside zone run, that they've kind of stopped it pretty well. That we haven't had the success that like, and maybe it's, different, personnel and what have you, but it's kind of like gone are the days of like Raheem Mostert takes it out to the edge and bam, 80 yards, touchdown, But either way, I mean, look, the Niners definitely one of the best running teams in the NFL. And I think that there's so many different looks and things that we can do, which really just stretches the defense. And they're just like, I can't imagine like the stress that defensive coordinators go through when they're like, oh man, how do we stop all these guys? But from a Niner fan perspective, it's awesome. I think, one of the things too, in terms of an underrated player, is, and we all know how good he is, and we all chant his name every time he gets a first down. But I mean, to me, one of the guys who just does such a great job is Kyle Juszczyk. They called him the offensive weapon when we signed him to that big deal, and that was kind of criticized at the time back in 2017. People were like, "You're giving how much money to a fullback?" But I think Juszczyk is he does everything. And also, I mean, a guy like Jawan Jennings is just on those critical downs. He's been so good. But we're going to finish it up here with a couple of fun questions here. Favorite 49er of all time?
So, I was born in 84. So the majority of my time watching the Niners was in the 90s. So, Jerry Rice is always up there. I mean, the GOAT. Steve Young is always up there. I mean, to me, my quarterback is Steve Young. I was 5 years old the last time Joe Montana really played for the 49ers. So, I really remember Steve. and Steve and Jerry. To me, those will always be memories of the 49ers. I was a big Patrick Willis fan. Just from everything you want out of a professional, that was Patrick Willis. I wish we could have got him a ring. If it came down to one single guy, I'd probably say Jerry Rice, just because of you will never see another Jerry Rice, hands down. I just don't think you're going to see it. So I will agree with always faithful 24/7. I will always agree. Jerry Rice, hands down. Because you're never going to see another one.
Yeah. I mean, and one of the crazy things with Jerry Rice is like, I mean, you look at the astronomical numbers that he put up in his career, like every meaningful receiving stat, like all-time catches, touchdowns, yards. It's funny because the NFL is clearly, I mean, you look at even the last 20 years, like the amount of like, you could say even mediocre quarterbacks throwing consistently for 4,500 yards has skyrocketed, yet players are still not really coming close to Jerry Rice's records. It just shows you how good he was. And I think the most impressive thing with Rice, of course, I remember there was some like Niner like documentary or something, and I think they said like it was like 2 or 3 days after the Niners had won a Super Bowl, and he's there at the facility working out, and it's like, dude, like, you want to be like, just go enjoy yourself, man. But I love the enthusiasm. But you go enjoy your Super Bowl win. But I think that Jerry Rice, I mean, of course, for any 49er fan, I was born in 87. So like yourself, I mean, I love going back and watching the Montana games, but I think it's different that I either was like way too young to remember it, or I just really wasn't there for those Montana times. So, and like a very quick little background for myself is that, so yeah, I actually grew up, well, I lived in Ireland for most of the late 90s and early 2000s. And back then you couldn't like watch games online. Internet quality wasn't nearly that good. So I would try to keep up with it, but I wasn't able to watch it as consistently. So if I had to go like favorite all-time 49er, I would say that it would have to be Frank Gore. Simply because I remember that draft, the 2005 draft, and of course, Alex Smith, number one. I think we took David Boss in the second round, but then Frank Gore, and that was a pick that was criticized because naturally, so Frank Gore, couple of, I think it was ACLs. I think he had both ACLs at Miami. But I mean, for him to have the career that he did, but it's kind of funny because when I really got back into football, it was around like 2004, 2005 when we were awful. And those Mike Nolan years and Dennis Erickson. But Frank Gore was the guy that like every week, he's the guy I was like, I can't wait to watch Frank Gore play. That 2006 season that Frank Gore had, Norv Turner was the offensive coordinator. I think he had like 1,700 rushing yards and
1,695 yards, 1,695 yards. And, because he wasn't expected to be a full-time starter when he came in, because we had Kevon Barlow, who had been a 1,000-yard rusher with the team. And so Barlow was the guy. And he got hurt that year, and they saw so much in Frank Gore that then the next year he goes out there and he has almost 1,700 yards.
I think back to that 2000, one of the, like, there's so many runs from that season that are iconic where it was at home against Seattle. He had 2 like 70+ yard touchdown runs. I think the most impressive run for me that whole season was, if you remember it, it was at Detroit. And I think he ended up getting around like 8 of their defenders and takes it in for the touchdown, and just absolute like pleasure to watch Frank Gore. And even though there was so many games through that time in the Mike Nolan and Singletary years that I'm like, yeah, we're probably going to lose this game, but at least I get to watch Frank Gore for 3 hours. Look in, of course, guys like Willis, Staley, big Navarro Bowman fan, a lot of those guys over the years that I've just really grew up to like be huge fans of. But Frank Gore is the guy that I think, he kind of, it was all against him. People wrote him off with the injuries. And I go back quickly. It was at Miami. I think it was Clinton Portis and Willis McGahee were there too at the same time. And they were all asked like, hey, who's the best player at Miami? They're like, Frank Gore. Frank Gore's the best. And I'm like, and McGahee and Portis, I know McGahee was a first round pick, I think with Buffalo maybe. Portis was a top pick, I think with Denver, and then got traded to Washington. or it
Yeah.
was vice versa. I know he played with Denver and Washington. Either way, great players in their own right, but they were like Frank Gore's the guy. So yeah, I think I'd go Frank Gore from like my kind of like my memory, but and then one very quick last final question: you could add any former 49er to the team. No quarterbacks because I think we'd all pick either Montana or Young, but who would you add?
I think this kind of speaks to coming back to what we said about Mooney Ward. Who gives you the best improvement over somebody that's currently there? Man, that's tough because you'd love to say Jerry Rice, right? I think of Randy Cross as far as,
Ooh,
because center is such a big thing to the team. And Brendel to me is not a great center. So you think of the level of improvement of a from a Brendel to a Randy Cross. I see Lisa saying I would add Joe Staley. I know this is going to sound like sacrilege, but I will tell you, Trent Williams to me, if we're talking Joe of the last 5 years of his career, I'd take Trent Williams. Trent is just a different animal, so I don't see you get a huge improvement there. This one's gonna sound. I might go with Dion.
ooh,
Just because imagine Dion with Mooney Ward and this front four.
that'd be sick.
I
That'd be
mean,
sick.
is anybody scoring on us? That's what I would say. Like if you put Dion out there, I don't see teams scoring more than 10 points. I mean,
That's, whew, that would be something, huh?
so that to me it would be between Dion or Randy Cross. As
Those
far
are
as
good
the
ones.
biggest impacts on the team. So that's where my vote is. What about you? What do you think?
So, and because I was like, I wanted to pose this question to you. Then I'm like, well, I actually have to think about my answer too. If we didn't pick up McCaffrey, I maybe would have said Roger Craig. But I'm gonna go. God, this is like really freaking tough, isn't it? But this might be a controversial figure, controversial player. He played with us for a few years.
Oh, I
Um,
know where you're going.
I think you might know. Number 99, Alden Smith. I would say Alden Smith because if you imagine Alden Smith and Nick Bosa coming off the edge, like that would be insane. That
I was
I would go.
Yeah. I was going that same direction. I was thinking about all because I was thinking about this today when you sent me that question. I was thinking I could say Alden, I could say Charles Haley, because of who you could pair with Bosa. You could go Bryant Young. I mean, for what he could do
Yeah,
on
I
the
mean, be
inside.
wise, man.
That's a tough. That's I mean, you could go Ronnie Lott, just from all of the legends that have been on the team, and you think, man, you could put any of those guys in there. I just think of like you said, Lenore's been a very good player, but just what I mean,
Oh, Dion,
you put Dion there, you're locking up man coverage, and nobody's getting anything. I mean,
big time.
it just is because I think you're looking at like 94 style with Eric Davis and Dion. And I mean, how tough that defense was. That 94 defense is grossly underrated,
Yeah,
because they were overshadowed by the offense. But that defense was grossly underrated. And Dion was the guy that in the mid 90s where he went, the Super Bowl went. Um,
the
and
catalyst, for I mean, you look at the Cowboys and they ended up winning a bunch with Dion. Yeah, it's just and that's one of the things when you have like a franchise like the 49ers where a question like this is really not easy because there's just so many amazing players to choose from. And there's really no like right or wrong answer. There's just a kind of like a personal preference. I think I would have maybe gone with Haley. I mean, you talk about winning Super Bowls. I think the guy won what, six or something like that, six or seven,
5.
maybe five,
Yeah, he won
which is, I
5.
mean, so crazy to think about. And then of course it's like, hey, you could always go with the GOAT, Jerry Rice. But yeah, I think for like more recent guys that I really kind of grew up watching, I just think, and it's such a shame. And hopefully Alden can kind of overcome personal demons and things like that. But man, it was what could have been like that Justin Smith, Alden Smith tandem was like no other. It was just that was great to watch. But Yeah, I just wanted to let's give a few comments here for people who very quickly. Roger Craig is in my top 10 running back. Yeah, I think, yeah, Roger Craig was the prototypical guy for that kind of offense, the first 1,000-yard rusher receiver. Um, Unfortunately, I think a lot of people kind of end up thinking about him with that fumble. I think it was against the New York Giants in the
It
playoffs where we
was.
were going for the three-peat, which is a bummer, but let's not let that overshadow. I mean, Roger Craig had such a great career, and his running style with the high knees, that was just so much fun to watch. Um, Rathman, love me some Tom Rathman. What a beast of a guy. But there you go, there you go. Rathman was awesome, but I mean, for me, I mean, I still love me some Juszczyk, but I love that he wears the 44 as well too, which is awesome. Yeah, Daryl Green, the cornerback, yeah, from the Washington football team. Rathman, yeah, Justin Smith, super underappreciated. I remember when we signed him, he played with Cincinnati, and he was a pretty high draft pick, but for the Bengals, and he wasn't that. I mean, it was like, oh, he's a pretty good player, and then for whatever way, Tom Sula, Vic Fangio were able to just unleash Justin Smith to be just an absolute monster. But I want to thank everyone for being here with the in the stream today, checking out the chat. I've had like a lot of fun. Honestly, I could probably go for like another 2 or 3 hours, but I think I don't want to take up too much of your time, and we both kind of got things to do. But man, I want to just say a huge thank you for this super rad conversation. Been looking forward to chatting to you for a while. Glad we were able to make it work out, and I had a whole lot of fun. Yeah, Ricky Waters, but he ended up going where, to Seattle, I think, after or something.
We're not going to
But
talk about that. We
after
don't
the
talk about
90,
that.
yeah, we don't. Yeah, Ricky Waters, loved him, running Ricky Waters, but ended up not sticking around, unfortunately. But again, just a huge thank you to the very special guest, Johnny Dell. I'm going to just say, guys, anyone here in the chat, we have like 14 people here. You got to subscribe to the channel if you want breakdowns. If you want to just learn more about the game, I highly recommend it. But Johnny, if you want to give a little plug for your channel and Twitter and whatnot, go for it.
Yeah, just JONNYDEL'S Football Academy on YouTube.
Oh,
Oh,
whoops.
he cut me off.
Didn't
He made me
mean to
go
do
away.
that. That's what I wanted to do. That's what I wanted to do.
Yeah, JONNYDEL'S Football Academy on YouTube, at JONNYDEL'S on Twitter, and that is Johnny with no H. That's a common mistake people make. But yeah, that's where you can find me. So
Excellent. Thank you so much again, man, for hopping on the show. Really appreciate it. I want to say a big shout out to everyone here in the chat too for the engagement. Really appreciate all you guys taking time out of your Friday to hang out with us and join in on the conversation. Appreciate all of you. Quick little heads up. I'm probably going to stream maybe one game tomorrow, maybe 1 or 2 games on Sunday. So stay tuned for that because it's always fun doing that. But yeah, thanks again, man. And yeah, we'll hopefully sometime in the future like to do it again. All right. Peace out, everybody.